Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Kendall Brooks, and I am 28 years old. I've been carrying this around on my chest for a little over 2 weeks, and it still lands the same way every time I think about it, like something tightening behind my ribs. My father was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's 2 months ago. He is 61. Right now, he is still mostly himself. He still makes bad jokes at the dinner table. He still beats me at cards often enough to act smug about it. He still remembers the names of my friends, asks about work, and complains about the price of gas like the world has personally offended him. But the doctors were direct with us in a way that stripped all comfort out of the room. The progression can vary. The timeline can shift. The decline itself is not negotiable. We are living in that terrible in-between now, where nothing is fully gone yet, but everything has changed. My mother cries more quietly than she used to. My older sister, Patrice, moved back home to help. I have been driving 3 hours every other weekend to spend time with him, while he is still unmistakably him. It is a strange kind of grief, loving someone who is still alive while knowing pieces of him are already on their way out. It is the kind of grief that starts early and does not ask permission. My father has always been a big presence in my life without ever needing to perform it. He is one of those men who does not fill a room by talking the loudest. He fills it by being solid. He taught me how to drive, how to change a tire, how to keep a straight face at a card table, how to shake somebody's hand properly, how to apologize when I am wrong without making a speech about it. When I was 10, he taught me chess by beating me so many times I thought he was doing it out of spite. Then one night he let me win a game, and when I smiled, he leaned back and said he had not let me win anything. I was just finally using my head. That was my father. Even his encouragement had some seasoning on it. After the diagnosis, I started noticing how much of my life is built out of things he handed me without making it sentimental. I also started noticing the little slips. He repeated a story in the same hour and did not realize it. He forgot where he put his keys and accused the dog of stealing them. He called my sister by my mother's name once and laughed it off, but the laugh did not reach anybody's eyes. Every visit home feels split in two now. There's the part where we pretend as much as possible, and the part underneath where all of us are bracing for impact. 10 months before all of this fell apart, I started dating a woman named Corinne Ellis. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue outside Memphis. She was bright, funny, confident, and the kind of person who never struggled to own a room. I am quieter by nature. I listen more than I talk. I used to think her energy balanced mine. She had a way of pulling me out of myself, or at least that is how I read it early on. For a while, things felt easy. She remembered little details I told her. She brought me coffee the way I liked it after I had mentioned it once. She texted me good luck before a work presentation that I had not even realized I was nervous about until I saw her message. When my father was diagnosed, she looked genuinely shaken. She came over that night with takeout and sat on the couch with me while I tried to explain what the doctor had said. I remember telling her that the cruelest part was not knowing which version of the future would arrive first. Would he forget names before places, places before routines, routines before us? Corinne took my hand and said she was sorry, really sorry, and that she was there for me. A week later, she came with me when I drove to see my parents. She hugged my mother in the kitchen. She sat at the table and listened to my father tell one of his old work stories. When he forgot part of it halfway through, she smiled and helped it back into the thread so gently that I remember feeling grateful for her in a way that now makes me sick. That is one reason what happened hit me so hard. It was not ignorance. It was not a careless joke from somebody who did not know the context. Corinne knew. She had watched my mother cry in her own kitchen. She had held my hand after the diagnosis. She had told me, more than once, that I did not need to be strong all the time with her. She had even said she admired how much effort I was putting into being there for my family. One night, about 3 weeks before movie night, I had come back from a weekend at my parents' house completely drained. My father had forgotten a route to the grocery store he has used for 15 years and laughed it off, but afterward I had to sit in my car for 10 minutes before driving back to my apartment, because I could feel something cracking inside me. Corinne came over later, saw my face, and asked what happened. I told her. She sat beside me and rubbed my back and said, "You do not have to act fine with me." I actually remember looking at her and thinking I was lucky. That memory bothered me afterward more than the public post did. The post was cruel. The performance before was worse. That is what made it two-faced. She had not merely failed me. She had studied where I was weakest, acted tender around it, and then used that exact pain for attention. 2 weekends before everything ended, Corinne came to my apartment on a Saturday evening. We had plans to stay in, order food, and watch a movie. There was a film I'd been meaning to see for a while. I will not name it, but it's centered on a father in his 60s whose memory begins to fail, and the story lets you feel his confusion from the inside. I knew it was going to hit close to home. Maybe that was why I picked it. Sometimes grief sits so heavily behind your teeth that you end up reaching towards something that will force it out. We ordered dinner, settled onto the couch, and started the film. For the first half hour, I was quiet in that locked-up way that probably should have warned me where I was headed emotionally. Corinne made a few comments during the early scenes, the usual half-whispered reactions people make during movies, and I answered when I could. About 40 minutes in, there is a scene where the father looks directly at his adult daughter and asks who she is. It is not loud. That is what makes it devastating. The actress playing the daughter does not break down dramatically. Her face just empties for a second, like her entire body has been forced to absorb a future she did not consent to. That scene hit me harder than I expected. I saw my own father in it immediately, not as he is now, but as he is heading toward becoming. I felt tears start before I had time to stop them. I was not sobbing. I was not curled over dramatically. It was quieter than that, which somehow made me feel more exposed. Tears started coming down my face, and I could not speak for a minute because I knew exactly what the scene was touching. It was not fiction for me. It was rehearsal. Corinne noticed and paused the movie. For one hopeful second, I thought she was stopping it to give me a moment, maybe to put a hand on my shoulder, maybe just to ask if I wanted a break. Instead, she looked at me with a strange expression that hovered somewhere between disbelief and amusement, and said, "Are you crying over a movie?" I told her, as evenly as I could, that it was not about actors to me. I said this is basically what is happening with my dad, and what is coming. She shrugged, actually shrugged, and said she knew that, but it was still just a movie. Then she added, "You are really taking it there." I remember staring at her, because the words did not make sense in my ears at first. Taking it there? It was already there. It had been there every day since the diagnosis. I told her the situation was not fictional for me. She looked almost embarrassed, but not for me. More like I had made the evening awkward. Then she said, "Okay, I just did not think it was that serious." That sentence stung worse than the first one. Not that serious. I wiped my face and told her to just play the movie. She unpaused it, but the feeling in the room was off after that. I could not settle back into the film. Every scene felt split by the fact that the person next to me had just watched me crack open over one of the worst fears of my life and responded as though I had made a social error. About 15 minutes later, she glanced at me again and said, not kindly, "You know, you cannot let stuff like this wreck you every time." I asked what exactly I was supposed to do with it instead. She said I did not need to answer every emotional thing that hard. I remember that because it was such a revealing sentence. As if grief were a knock at the door and I was choosing to let it in too eagerly. I told her this is what it looks like when somebody you love is being erased one memory at a time. She sighed and said she was only saying I should pace myself. Then, a few minutes later, I noticed the glow of her phone in her lap. At the time, I assumed she was checking a text. I know now she was taking a picture. That detail sat in my stomach later like a piece of glass. While I was sitting there, trying not to imagine the day my father might not know me, she was framing the moment for later use. When the movie ended, she acted almost normal again. That was another layer of the cruelty. She moved easily back into ordinary conversation, as if nothing damaging had happened. She asked whether I wanted dessert. She laughed at a video somebody had sent her. She kissed my cheek before she left and told me to get some sleep. If she had looked guilty or uncomfortable or even annoyed, I might have been on guard the next morning. Instead, she left me with the impression that maybe I'd been too raw, too primed, too sensitive. I hate that word now, because it gets used as a weapon by people who confuse tenderness with weakness. I went to bed uneasy, but still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. The next morning, that instinct died. I woke up to 6 messages from my friend Quentin. Quentin does not send 6 messages in a row unless something is on fire or hilarious, and nothing about the hour suggested hilarious. The first text just said, "Dude." The second said, Please tell me this is not what it looks like. Then came screenshots. Corinne had posted 2 public Instagram story slides sometime after she left my apartment. The first was a picture of us on the couch. I had not even realized she had taken it. I was looking toward the television, not at her, and you could tell from the angle that it had been snapped quietly from beside me. Over the image she had written, "My boyfriend cried during a movie. Imagine being that emotional." There was a laughing emoji after it. The second slide was worse. It said, "I need a man, not a golden retriever with tears." I sat up in bed and just stared at my phone. I must have stared at those screenshots for 3 straight minutes. There's a very specific kind of humiliation that comes from realizing a private moment was not only witnessed without compassion, but preserved and packaged for other people's entertainment. She knew exactly why I cried. She knew my father had just been diagnosed. She knew the movie was about memory loss and the slow collapse of identity. And she had turned that into a joke for social media. It felt like being skinned in public after already being wounded in private. What hit me hardest was the timing. She had not posted those stories days later in the heat of an argument. She posted them almost immediately. That meant she had left my apartment, opened her phone, selected the photo, typed those captions, and put them out to around 1,400 followers while the memory of me, sitting beside her with tears on my face, was still fresh. It was not impulsive in the way people sometimes mean when they excuse cruelty. It involved steps. It involved decisions. It involved choosing, more than once, to turn my private grief into content. I could feel the shock changing shape inside me as I looked at the screenshots. First disbelief, then humiliation, then something colder. Clarity. I am not a confrontational person. I avoid drama to a fault. I usually choose silence until silence starts costing too much. But this was one of those moments where the truth stood up so cleanly in front of me that I did not need time to think my way around it. I knew exactly what had happened and exactly what I was looking at. This was not somebody who had made a dumb joke and regretted it. This was somebody who had seen vulnerability and smelled an opportunity to get laughs and validation. I do not know how else to explain it except to say that something in me stopped trying to protect her from the consequences of herself. Her stories were temporary, but her most recent grid post was still up in public. It was a selfie from 2 days earlier with some caption about living her best life. I went there, opened the comments, and wrote one sentence, then another, then stopped and deleted half of what I had started because I did not want anger writing for me. I wanted precision. I wanted truth. I wanted something that would expose the cruelty without me sounding wild or vindictive. I ended up posting this. Imagine dating someone for 10 months, telling them your father was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's, watching a movie about Alzheimer's together, and then posting your boyfriend's tears for laughs. The movie hit home because my dad may not remember my name in a few years. But sure, imagine being that emotional. I did not have to imagine dating someone this cruel. I just lived it. Then I blocked her. I did not call her names. I did not exaggerate. I did not threaten, rant, or beg. I told the truth in the same public space she had chosen for the lie by omission. I knew some people would call it petty. Maybe part of it was. But mostly it was measured. She had publicly humiliated me without context. I publicly added the context. That was all. What happened next moved faster than I expected. Because I had blocked her, I could not see the response directly, but Quentin became my unwilling war correspondent. Within 4 hours, he was sending updates like he was narrating a game. My comment had detonated the story she had tried to tell. People who had seen the original stories and laughed suddenly understood what they had actually been laughing at. One of her college friends commented that what she did was vile. A coworker replied, saying she was embarrassed she had encouraged it in direct messages before knowing the truth. Another friend wrote that mocking somebody's grief over a parent's diagnosis was not humor, it was cruelty. Quentin told me her comment section went from lighthearted vanity to full accountability session in under an hour. She deleted the post. Then she deleted several more. Then she went private. About 6 hours after my comment. She tried to call me. Blocked. Then she texted me from a friend's phone saying I had no right to embarrass her like that, and that what happened between us was private. I almost laughed when I read that. I texted back, "You posted it publicly to 1,400 people. I just added the part you left out." She did not respond. That silence felt more honest than anything she had said in the past 12 hours. I would like to say that was the end of it, that the truth landed and everybody moved on, But people like Corinne do not let consequences sit unchallenged. They start reworking the narrative the minute reality stops flattering them. On the second day after my comment, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I answered mostly because my family had been under enough medical stress that unknown calls no longer felt safely ignorable. It was Corinne's older sister, Denise. She did not waste time on courtesy. She said Corinne was deeply upset and that I owed her an apology for humiliating her in front of people she knew. I asked what exactly I was supposed to apologize for. Denise said I could have handled it privately instead of putting her sister on blast. That phrase, putting her on blast, made my jaw tighten because it made my response sound theatrical while treating Corinne's original post like a small social misstep. I told Denise that her sister had publicly mocked me for crying over my father's terminal illness. Denise immediately said Corinne was joking, that humor was just part of her personality, and that I was being overly sensitive. I said, very slowly because I wanted every word to land, my father has Alzheimer's. He will progressively lose memory, personality, and independence. Your sister watched me process that in real time and turned it into entertainment. Explain to me which part of that is a joke. Denise went quiet for one beat, then said I still should have handled it privately. I told her Corinne gave up the right to privacy the moment she used a private moment as public material. Denise hung up on me. That family had a real talent for ending conversations the second truth got too sharp. On the third day, Corinne started the first serious damage control campaign. Quentin, who still followed her through a burner account because he is both nosy and loyal in ways I appreciate, sent me a screenshot of a news story from a backup account I had not known she had. It said, when your ex twists a joke into something, it was not just to get sympathy. Manipulation at its finest. Real men do not weaponize emotion. I read that twice and felt something colder than anger move through me. She was not just minimizing what she had done now. She was trying to invert it completely. Suddenly, I was the manipulator. I was the one exploiting a serious illness for attention. She even got a few people in her orbit to echo the spin. A cousin reposted it with a comment about staying strong when men play victim. But the problem with a rewritten story is that it falls apart when the original screenshots still exist. Quentin had saved everything. Other people had too. The first stories were already circulating in group chats. Receipts have a way of surviving a sudden change in morality. You can call something a joke if the evidence is vague. It becomes much harder when the evidence shows you mocking a crying partner over a father's degenerative illness in clear, stupid text. On the fourth day, she messaged me from a new Instagram account because her main was blocked. The message was long and theatrical, but the core of it was simple. She said I had ruined her friendships and her reputation, that people at work were looking at her differently, and that I had destroyed her life because I could not take a joke. Notably missing from that message was any actual claim that I had mistreated her in the relationship. No fear, no sadness, no mention of feeling unsafe, controlled, or emotionally harmed. Just fury about consequences. I did not answer. I screenshot the message and sent it to Quentin, who responded that the audacity was almost impressive. Around the same time, through one of those absurdly interconnected social webs adults pretend do not exist, I found out that the screenshots of her stories had made their way around her office. Not because I sent them. I want that clear. I did not contact her job. I did not try to cost her professionally. But she worked in a human resources adjacent role at a mid-sized company, and multiple people who saw what she had posted apparently decided, on their own, that publicly mocking a partner's grief showed terrible judgment for someone in her position. That was not a scheme. That was her content traveling through the networks she had built around herself. The fifth day was when she crossed a line that made my exhaustion curdle into anger again. She found my mother's phone number somehow, probably from the time she had used my phone to call for takeout or directions, or any of the 100 ordinary things that feel harmless until a breakup turns somebody invasive. She called my mother. My mother is 58 and had spent the previous week helping my father through appointments, medication questions, insurance confusion, and the daily emotional wreckage of a diagnosis that none of us were built to carry gracefully. Corinne called that woman and tried to tell her I had been emotionally abusive during our relationship, and that the Instagram situation was just me controlling the narrative after the breakup. My mother told me about the call later. According to her, it lasted less than 2 minutes because she refused to give it oxygen. Corinne started with some version of, I just think you should know the kind of person your son really is. My mother said, Honey, I know exactly the kind of person my son is. He drives 6 hours round trip every other weekend to play cards with his father while he still can. What kind of person calls a sick man's wife to complain about online consequences? Corinne apparently tried to say I had humiliated her. My mother cut her off and said, You mocked a boy crying over his daddy's illness for strangers on the internet. I'm going to hang up now. Lose this number. When my mother told me that story, I felt both proud of her and ashamed that Corinne had forced her to spend even 90 seconds on this nonsense. That call to my mother was the first time I broke my rule about not reaching back out. Until then, I had responded only when necessary, and mostly through text. After hearing what happened, I borrowed Quentin's phone so I would not unblock Corinne on mine, and I called her. She picked up immediately. That alone told me she had been waiting for contact. I did not let the conversation drift. I told her this was me, and I was going to say one thing one time. I told her not to contact my family again. I told her my mother was caring for a husband with a degenerative brain disease and did not have the bandwidth for Corinne's feelings about social media consequences. Then I told her that if she contacted anyone in my family again, I would pursue a harassment complaint. I made sure to say it in the calmest voice I could manage, because I wanted no ambiguity and no emotional performance to hide behind later. She laughed once, bitterly, and said, Oh, so now you want to talk when it is about protecting your mommy. That sentence nearly emptied the last reserve of patience I had. I said goodbye and hung up. Then I sat on the edge of my bathtub for 10 minutes with my hand shaking. Not because I doubted what I had said, because grief is already exhausting, and there is something uniquely depleting about having someone take the worst season of your life and keep trying to squeeze fresh drama out of it. Things went quiet for 4 days after that. I let myself believe maybe the message had finally gotten through, or maybe she had simply burned through her audience and had nowhere left to perform. Those 4 days were the first real stretch of peace I had since the screenshots hit my phone. I went to work. I drove home to see my parents. I played chess with my father one evening over video call when he was too tired for cards. He tried to move his bishop like a knight halfway through the game, and when I corrected him, he laughed and said he was testing whether I had been paying attention. I laughed too, even though afterward I sat in my parked car outside my apartment and cried again, softer this time, because there are moments when you cannot tell whether a joke is still a joke or whether the disease has quietly stepped further into the room. That is what my life actually was. That is what Corinne had mocked. I kept thinking about that contrast. While I was trying to memorize the sound of my father's voice, she was scrambling to protect the version of herself that had been exposed. Then came her biggest escalation. 9 days after my original comment, I was at my recreational basketball game when Quentin handed me his phone during a water break and told me to look. Corinne had made yet another public account and posted a long caption under a carefully posed selfie. It was one of those essays people write when they want to sound wounded, wise, and deliberately vague all at once. She talked about surviving emotional abuse. She wrote about manipulative partners using sympathy to control public perception. She described walking on eggshells and said that a harmless joke had been weaponized to destroy her social life. She did not use my name, but she included enough specific details that anyone familiar with the situation would know exactly who she meant. Reading that caption, I did not feel anger first. I felt fear. Not theatrical fear, real fear. Because terms like emotional abuse and manipulation do not just float harmlessly once released. They cling. They stain. For men especially, you do not get the luxury of assuming people will calmly wait for evidence. The accusation itself can become the story. I sat in my car after the game with Quentin in the passenger seat and just stared through the windshield. He let me sit in it for a minute before reminding me of something I needed to hear. He said I had the screenshots, the timeline, her message from the fake account, and my mother as a witness to the call. He said the truth already existed. I just needed to make sure it was not trapped in my own phone. That night, I made what I think was the smartest decision I made in the whole mess. I did not write a public rebuttal. I did not post some furious point-by-point takedown. I did not turn it into a spectacle. Instead, I sent private messages to 3 people. Her college roommate who had condemned her original post, the coworker who had said she was embarrassed by Corinne's behavior, and one close friend who had quietly unfollowed her after the first round of fallout. To each of them, I sent the same screenshots. The original stories mocking me. The direct message from the fake account in which Corinne raged about losing friendships and reputation, with no mention whatsoever of abuse. Then I added one short note. I am not making a public post about this. She is now claiming I abused her. You have seen the timeline. I just want the truth to exist somewhere outside my phone. Do with this what you will. That was all. No pressure. No campaign. No speeches. I did not ask them to defend me. I just made sure the people already close enough to the situation had the complete picture. There is a difference between revenge and refusing to leave yourself undefended. That line mattered to me. I did not want to become consumed by proving something to the internet. I wanted the truth placed in the hands of people who already knew enough to judge it fairly. What those three people did with it ended the whole thing far more effectively than any public argument could have. Her former roommate, Tiana, who had known Corinne for nearly 8 years, apparently called her directly after seeing the screenshots and told her she had gotten caught being cruel and was now throwing every available label at the wall to avoid accountability. She told her she was done. The co-worker, whose name I learned later was Lena, shared the screenshot of Corinne's fake account message in a private office group chat because the contrast between that message and the emotional abuse essay was impossible to ignore. In one, Corinne was furious about social fallout. In the other, she was recasting herself as a survivor. The gap between those two documents apparently did what my words never could. It exposed the machinery. The third person, one of Corinne's closer friends, reached out to me privately and said something that reframed the entire relationship in my head. She told me she had seen Corinne do something similar with another boyfriend years ago. Not the same details, but the same pattern. Do something nasty, get called out, then rapidly reposition herself as the injured party while editing history around the original act. She said she should have warned me when Corinne and I started dating. I told her it was not her responsibility, and I meant that. But after the conversation ended, I sat there for a long time thinking about how often charm is just camouflage with better timing. Within a week, Corinne's emotional abuse post disappeared. No explanation, no follow-up, no further declarations about healing or truth or manipulation. It just vanished. Her account went private again. From what I heard through Quentin and the same reluctant small-town grapevine that had carried the rest of this saga, whatever support she had left had thinned almost to nothing. The friends who had defended her went quiet when the screenshots contradicted her rewritten version. The coworker network stopped engaging with her beyond what professionalism required. The roommate who had once hyped her up stopped taking calls. Even Denise, the sister who had come at me so hard in the beginning, backed off after a final attempt to reach me through LinkedIn of all places, accusing me of destroying Corinne's life. I reported the message as spam and moved on. That was the last thing I heard directly connected to the campaign. The silence afterward felt different from the first silence. The first one had felt temporary, loaded, like a held breath before the next performance. This one felt empty in a final way. Not peace exactly, more like the collapse of momentum. She had run out of people willing to carry her version for her. I did not want to pretend any of that felt triumphant. It did not. I was not walking around my apartment feeling victorious because my former girlfriend had lost friends and credibility. Mostly I felt tired. The same weeks in which all of this drama was unfolding were the weeks I was also driving to see my father and noticing new little changes. He repeated stories more often. He misplaced ordinary words and covered it with humor. One night, over FaceTime, he forgot a basic chess rule and tried to bluff his way through it with a grin I recognized from childhood. I laughed with him because that is what you do when the alternative is letting fear consume. The room. There is no clean emotional lane for this kind of thing. My ex was imploding socially because she chose to be cruel, and my father was quietly slipping in ways none of us could stop. Those realities sat next to each other in my life, and one of them made the other feel even smaller and sadder. Corinne had spent weeks trying to convince people she was the wounded party in a story that began with her mocking somebody else's pain. Meanwhile, I was trying to memorize the cadence of my father's voice in case one day it changed beyond recognition. That difference in stakes became the thing that finally detached me from any lingering need to engage. I cannot afford to let her have more of my attention than the people I was actually in danger of losing. Looking back, the core betrayal was not merely the public post, ugly as it was. It was the decision beneath it. Corinne saw me in a private, vulnerable moment tied to the most frightening reality in my life, and instead of protecting it, she converted it into material. She used it for validation, for laughs, for the little burst of attention some people chase like oxygen. That is what ended us, more than the mockery itself. If she had seen my tears and reached for me, if she had simply been decent, none of the fallout would have happened. There would have been no comment, no screenshots circulating, no friends pulling away, no office whispers, no panicked rewriting of events. All of it traces back to that one choice she made while sitting beside me on my couch, with full knowledge of what my family was carrying. Every consequence that followed was simply the truth catching up to an act of cruelty she thought would evaporate after 24 hours. It did not evaporate. People saw it. Then they saw more. Then they saw the pattern. That is not something I orchestrated. That is what happens when a person keeps revealing herself long after she should have stopped. A few nights ago, my father and I played chess again over FaceTime. Halfway through the game, he forgot which piece I had moved last and accused me of trying to cheat him. I told him he still had not lost his talent for trash talk. He laughed, leaned closer to the screen, and told me I looked tired. I said I was fine. He looked at me for a second and said the right person will never make you feel small for caring deeply. Then he moved his knight into a terrible position and acted like it was strategic genius. I wrote that line down after the call ended because one day he may not remember saying it, and I need to keep the things he gives me while I still can. Corinne lost people because she chose to be cruel and then doubled down until nobody decent could keep pretending not to see it. I lost 10 months, some illusions, and whatever future I thought I was building with her. But I also walked away with something clean. I did not let my grief be turned into a joke and swallowed in silence. I told the truth. I protected my family when I had to, and I got out. The noise around her eventually died. The important things did not. My father is still here. My mother still needs help. My sister still calls me after appointments. The real story kept moving, and that is where I went. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.